Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert, and this is the live stream I do a couple of times a week where we talk about anything to do with job search and careers. So the title of this episode number 143, is Resumes That Get Results, the Secrets Hiring Managers Won't Tell You. So that's what we're going to start off talking about today. But basically, this is a live Q&A, so this is your big chance to ask me questions, anything that you're wondering about or struggling with when it comes to job search. So if that's you, and you are a subscriber to my channel, and you have been so for any amount of time, get in the chat. You should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face, and depending on what device you're watching this on. And get in there and let me know what's on your mind, and we'll go from there, and I'll try to help you out if I can. So, also a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. And my Patreons and my super thanks donors. Those are always cool to get. And finally, to you, my viewers and participants. Thank you for being here. Okay, without any further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so resumes that get results. There's a couple of things about resumes that not everybody realizes. And that's understandable because most people don't see kind of the other side of the table, the mentality of the people that receive your resumes and what they do with it. Okay. Now I'm talking in the context here of worker level jobs. So that's most people. And unless you're, a manager, and I mean a real manager, not like, manager, where they call you that, but then they treat you like a grunt. So this is most people. Here's the deal. There's a common myth right off the hop that the resume gets you the job. It doesn't. Okay, the resume gets you the interview. That's a little bit different. Okay, the interview is what gets you the offer, and then the offer gets you the job. That's the idea. So it's kind of like 3 stages, right? So the application stage where you apply, that's the resume phase. That's what your resume is really designed to do. It's to get you through that phase so you get an interview. And if it does that, that's the whole point of the resume. Beyond that point, they're not judging you on your resume anymore. They're judging you on what they saw in front of them or what they saw on a Zoom call, depending on what format it takes. Okay, so your resume gets you the interview. So really, the whole point of the resume is not to get you the job, it's to get you the interview. That means when you send a resume to a hiring manager or anyone that's going to consider you, they're not wondering, is this person right for the job? They're wondering, is this person worth bringing in and talking to for half an hour? That's what they're thinking, right? It's not your life story. It's not really, anything like that. It's a sales document that earns the interview. That's really what it is, Now, the thing is, obviously what goes on out there varies, but generally speaking, the person reading it, whether it's a recruiter or whether it's a hiring manager or whether it's a computer, like an ATS system or ATS, they don't read it, they skim it, they scan it. That's the idea. So don't be surprised when you find out that, they didn't read your entire resume to make a decision. I'm not down with the latest figures. I know Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. She knows this stuff. It's like, how many seconds does a human spend, like a recruiter, do they spend scanning your resume? It's like 6 seconds or something like that. Because they're only looking for a couple of, obvious things on it. They're not there to read the whole thing like a life story. They're there to just scan it very, very quickly and decide whether it makes sense to bring you in for interview or not. Okay. They're looking for your current job title. Okay. That's kind of one of the more important things that they're looking for. They're looking for, your last employer, if they recognize your last employer, and who they are. They're looking for the dates. That's a common thing. It's not universal, but they're generally looking for the dates. Have you been out of work for 3 years, when your last job came to an end, or are you working now? Things like this, okay? And they're looking at bullet points for the results, like for, your qualifications and things like that. That's why it's important to highlight the qualifications or the things you have that they mentioned in the job posting, right? That's the idea. So that stuff stands out. It should be on the first page. It should be kind of pretty prominent so they can see it. So a human can see it when they like scan this thing. That's the idea. Sheenan Grief is the wins the award today for the first person in the chat. Sheenan Grief says, "Hi Bill, thanks. You spelled my name with a lowercase b. You do realize that, right? Thanks for the support. Maybe dumb question. I put my summary core skills for the job at the top. Let's say I'm experienced in C sharp. You're a developer. That explains so much. Do I have to mention it again in another section? Well, it depends. I mean, there is no right or wrong. If they said in the requirements, that this job is like a C sharp developer job, you're going to need to know C sharp. You're going to need to have a lot of expertise in it, and that's pretty damn important. Then yeah, it makes sense, like emphasizing it at the top of your resume and then also including it lower down under the pertinent section. Maybe like when you describe your work experience and you say, I did all this work in C sharp. Yes, if it's important. If it's not important, like if they haven't even mentioned it in the job description, then maybe it doesn't warrant being plastered all over your resume. You know what I'm saying? But if it's in the requirements, if it's mentioned in the job posting, then I would make it prominent and I would keep it in its own section. There's no harm in repeating things for emphasis, especially considering what I was saying a moment ago, that they just scan your resume very briefly, looking for a few standout points and that's it. So yes, if you want them to notice this, then make it prominent. Okay. Now, coming back to the topic I was covering, I covered some important points like the resume. Its whole purpose is not to get you the job. It's just to get you the interview. Your interview is really what gets you the job. And your resume is going to be skimmed. It's going to be scanned. It's not going to be read in depth, right? That's just how it is. Maybe in a perfect world, people would read your resume in their entirety and they'd remember it and absorb it, but unfortunately, what's going on with recruiters and hiring managers, both, is that they're getting more than just your resume. They're getting like many people's resume. And the thing is, like, first of all, recruiters are drowning in resumes because their whole job is, recruitment and selection, right? Hiring managers, they are usually not on the front lines of the recruitment and selection. So it's common that, when you apply for a job, it doesn't go directly to them. They do see resumes and stuff later on, but the problem with hiring managers is that hiring is a sideshow for them. That's not their job. It's not the core of their job. They might be in charge of a team that's responsible for doing certain work. That's their job, right? So having to read resumes and sit in job interviews, that's kind of a sideshow. That takes them away from their job, right? That's how they usually regard it. So as a result, anything like optional, like reading your whole resume in its entirety, that they're going to skip that. They're just going to look at the bottom line. Just like, let's take a look at this. Okay, they got this. Okay, that is potential. This. No, I'm not really seeing what I want. Sorry, right? It's literally like that. Okay. Now, something else I wanted to cover, which is not super original. This is a pretty common thing, is that people have the problem of like, well, how do I write a resume? What do I put on there? Now, obviously, I put on there my last job, but how do I describe it, right? And there's a couple of big standard things you could do. One is to describe your duties, right? So you could say, I answered phones, I developed apps, I debugged C# code, I used these tools, right? That's what you did. And that's pretty common. You're listing your duties and responsibilities. Or you could alternatively write more or less the same information, but you phrase it in terms of accomplishments. Okay? Now, what the hell does that mean? That means something very specific. It means instead of talking about what you did, you talk about the effect you had, the impact you had. Okay? So, for example, what's the point of hiring you? What's the point of your whole job? Well, it's to have an impact, right? Either you reduce the workload, you handled certain things they wanted you to handle, or you improved something in some way, you achieved something in some way. If you're just doing projects, like things that have a beginning and an end, you supervise the construction of a building, I don't know. But you write that as an accomplishment. You say, like, I achieved this, right? Okay, that's an accomplishment. Rather than saying, I supervised the construction of buildings as like a duty, you say, we built this building that cost this much, right? It's an accomplishment. Now, when you phrase accomplishments, you're going to emphasize the impact you had, and you're going to want to quantize it, okay? That means you got to use numbers, right? Now, the standard way of doing it is to use either percentages or currency. Right? So if you lived in, say, the United States where they use American dollars, you would quantize the impact you had in terms of American dollars. So you either saved this much money through the work you did, or you helped make this much money through the work you did, right? Maybe you work in operations and you don't see currency. You just see like, oh, we debugged this app, this enterprise, like system, a computer system, ERP, and you don't really see what impact it had, but you can estimate it. Now, if you're still working there, you could go hang out with the accountant and say, like, what's the impact of this, right? Or you could do what most people do in this situation, and they just estimate it, right? So they say, okay, we did this work, and it improves efficiency by this much. It takes the user this much less time to do something, or it captures this information, whatever it does. And then you turn that into like, okay, so those people, they're paid approximately this much per hour. So if I save them 3 hours a week per person, right? You can, if you know how much they make approximately per hour, you can do the math and you can figure out what impact that had. So you can say, I was part of a team that developed this app that saved $150,000 per year for the company, something like that, right? So that would be how you would quantize an accomplishment you had, and then you put it on the resume. So the idea is on your work history, when they read it and they say, I worked here and then I worked here, right? So here, this job, here's my title, right? Here's the dates. And then you have a list of point form things that you did in that job. Instead of saying, I answered phones, I did this, I did that, I developed code, you say, I was part of a team that developed this app that saved this much money for the company per year or per quarter, something like that. So you quantize it. And then if somebody asks you in a job interview, like, what's this about? You can explain. You can say, well, what we did is we created this app, and what the app did was it was a new way of doing something that we'd always done with an older system. But the advantages of using the app is that it does this work in half the time. So these people were using it. It was more efficient for them because they could accomplish the same thing in half the time. And that saved them X many hours per week. And the company pays them approximately this much. So this was the impact it had. It reduced our costs by this much and freed up our capabilities. Right? So that would be an example of an accomplishment. It's a talking point in an interview, and it's something you put on a resume in a certain format. It's the impact you had, and it's quantized with numbers, either percentages, like we improved the efficiency of the system by 15%, or in terms of currency. This new computer system that we rolled out, it saved this much money for the company every year or per quarter, something like that. So it's measured in currency. Okay, so you have a bunch of those on your resume. You're showing your impact. Okay, so that's a common thing to do. That usually makes more of an impression on somebody reading it than simply saying, I was a C# developer, right? You know, so that's the idea. Killer Zero is here. Killer Zero says, hey, Bill, always great to see you, sir. Well, thank you, Killer Zero. It's always great to see you, too. And if you have any questions, let me know, because I'm here to answer your questions. This is what I do. This is how I get my kicks. You could put it that way. Sheenan Grief says, thanks, Bill. Does it make sense to summarize former employers when I did the same tasks with similar impact, like covered code with unit tests, reducing live issues by 20%? Full disclosure, I don't know what covered code with unit tests means, but reducing issues by 20%, maybe it's an industry specific thing that I don't understand, but I would want to know what you mean by issues. You know, so if you said like bugs or you said user complaints or something like that, that would be more clear rather than issues, unless that's something very specific in your industry that everybody knows what it means. Like these questions, I mean, the answer is yes and no. It can make sense depending on the situation, but it's not necessarily something you would always do regardless. You know what I mean? It depends what you're going for. It depends how relevant this work is. If you're applying for exactly the same job you've done before, right, it would probably make sense to go into detail about the previous job that's on your resume and really break it out. And not just say what you did, but also have the accomplishments in there. Like, it makes sense to go into that detail, especially if a lot of that stuff was in the job posting where they said, we're looking for someone that can do this, right? So then absolutely, you would break it all out. You know, I don't care if it was a previous employer, you'd break the whole thing out, right? And explain, this is what I've done, right? And then anything that's in the requirements on the job posting, personally, I would consider like pulling it out of where it is in your resume and displaying it also prominently up front. So you could do like an executive summary or professional summary at the top of your resume where like it says your name and then you get professional summary and then it's like bam, 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 bam. All the things that they're looking for. Highlighted, you know, in bold, in large print, you know, so that if a human is looking at it, they can see you match up to all the stuff that they were asking for. You know, that's what I would recommend. Somebody says, how to explain my work experience and projects? Well, explain it. I mean, I just spent 10 minutes or 15 minutes like breaking how you would write out accomplishments rather than duties. So, I mean, you could rewind and hear what I just said, I suppose. If you have any more specific questions, like that's more specific than what I just said, please let me know and I'll go into greater detail if you wish. Thane says, hi there. I feel like screening resume procedures got influenced by AI a lot lately. You have to send a lot more CVs to get an actual call. What are your thoughts around it? Any tips to come on top? Well, to be honest with you, like I've said many, many times on this channel, this really is like it's the law of diminishing returns. This is not the best way to get a job by far. The best way to get a job is on the hidden job market using networking, using things like direct outreach. You're doing the same type of work, but you get a lot more bites. And the added bonus is that usually you're dealing directly with a hiring manager without any recruiters, without any HR department crap, like making it stupid. You can just have a frank conversation with the hiring manager, see if it makes sense for you guys to talk any further, if they're looking for someone, if they have any openings, you know. That stuff is so much more promising than this. I would recommend that you check that out. This is the only reason I'm covering this is because a lot of young people who were never told any different are doing this as a default thing because it's traditional. It's almost like looking at the classifieds in a newspaper. That's traditionally how you get jobs, right? I mean, 100 years ago, you could get jobs like that. 200 years ago, you could get jobs like that. So it's kind of a thing that sticks in everybody's mind. But, ever since the internet, nobody reads the newspapers and looks for a job that way. But it's still stuck in people's minds, right? This is a throwback to that. Posted jobs are a throwback. 15% of jobs are posted. So all the jobs that you're seeing out there that are posted, that's 15%. 15% of all the jobs that are actually out there. The other 85 are not posted, right? You could get them, but you don't get them like this. You know what I'm saying? So if you're asking what I would recommend, is I would recommend you drop this. For the most part, it wouldn't be the central pillar of your job search campaign. It would be something you kind of, you check every once in a while, but it's not really where you focus. You know what I mean? And you look in the hidden job market. That's what I would recommend. And the recent AI stuff in the last 5 years, where they've built in AI to ATS, like applicant tracking systems, the computer software that handles your resume. They're making them slowly smarter and smarter, right? Slowly. That's just accelerated the decline of posted jobs, because what you're getting now is you're getting 800 people, 1,000 people applying for a job. It's all screened by ATS. And, despite all of this, it's not like the jobs are improving, and it's not like the candidates are improving. They're not getting better at finding good candidates. They're actually getting worse. If you go by how long people stay at jobs, the average dwell time, or whatever you call it, it's going down. It's continuing its downward slide. So it's not like it's producing better results. So yeah. Anyway, so the feed moved on me. So this was a Thane, I think. Yeah. What are your thoughts around any just to come on top? Well, if you're wanting to win at this game, what you're doing is you're going up against 800 people, and you're elevating yourself above the crowd. So the way you win at this game is you have to match the requirements better than anyone else. Now, most of the requirements are posted in the job posting. So they say explicitly, we're looking for someone who has this, and this, right? So that makes it easy. If you want to stand out, then you would send in a resume that says, I have this, and this. There you go. There's a perfect match, right? The requirements also include things that are not stated. You can see that if you go to ChatGPT and you say okay, I'm applying for this job, say project manager, whatever. And what are the top 10 soft skills or something that would really identify a really good candidate to be in that role? And then it'll spit out okay, this. So those things are often not stated, but it is what they're looking for, right? And then on top of it, they have probably a couple of other requirements that are just quirky, weird things. They've got it in their idea. They've got the idea in their head that they're looking for someone like this. And it's totally illogical, but it's what they want. I want someone tall. I want someone that, I get along with and I can joke with, and they joke back and they have the same sense of humor as me. That's who I want to work with. So I'm not going to write that in the job posting, but I'm going to be looking for that in the interviews. It's you can't guess that. So in order to elevate yourself above the crowd, you would have to have all of those things. You just knock it right out of the park. Pretty tall order, right? It's not something you can plan for and craft and win, any more than you can just summon up the qualifications. Either you have them or you don't. It's just that simple, So, so that's the only way to win, at that. That's just how this stuff goes. If you happen to have exactly what they happen to be looking for, it's a match. If you don't, guessing what they're looking for is more of a problem than speaking to it. I feel screening procedures got influenced. Yep. Okay. What tips do you come out on top? So is it preferable to explain everything for freshers in work experience? What does that mean? How to explain my work experience and projects. So is it preferable to explain everything for freshers in work experience? What are you talking about? Is that like, you mean the work experience section of your resume? You're asking like what you explain there? Is that what you mean? Sorry, my monitor is like brighter than all hell. I have to manually adjust these things. Okay. Sorry, if you could further explain what you mean, then I'll be happy to respond. I just don't understand what you're referring to. Something nice from Thane. McLovin, should I even bother to apply to online job postings? If you're a really good match, then go for it. There's no harm in doing it. But if you're not like a perfect match, quite honestly, I would look elsewhere. Posted jobs are just a crappy way to get hired. And usually posted jobs, I mean, not always, there's exceptions, things like government, right? But where they post everything, right? But certainly in the private sector, most of the jobs are filled before they get to the point where you post it and look at strangers as candidates, So I would do things like direct outreach. That's where, just so everybody knows, this is something where you don't know a single person. What you're doing is you're reaching out directly to the employer. You're not looking for posted jobs. You're looking for employers. You don't care if they have a job posted or not, because that has no bearing on whether they're hiring or not. Most organizations are hiring and they never post jobs, right? That's why 85% of jobs are not posted. Okay? So what I'm advocating for, and I'm saying that's a lot more promising than applying to posted jobs, is doing things like direct outreach. Okay? Now, if you don't know what direct outreach is, I have videos. You could go to ChatGPT, say, what is the direct outreach method of getting a job? Okay? So I'm just saying, I mean, this is not something I'm making up. It's like an open secret. You can go and learn about it. Okay? But that's what I'd recommend. Because what you're doing is you're contacting the hiring managers directly. You're not going through some intermediary like a recruiter, okay? And if you're contacting organizations that you're actually interested in working there, they employ a lot of people like you. They do a lot of work that's exciting for you because it's the stuff you're trained to do, It makes sense to reach out to these people. Now you can reach out to them going over many different channels. You could say many different things. You could ask for many different things. You could, what I'm saying? You could volunteer many different things. There's a lot of stuff out there, right? There's a lot of options here. Okay. Now, if you want to see if this intrigues you and you're like, okay, what is that? I've never done that. I've never heard of that. I have a video, for what it's worth. I've got a video linked in the description box under this live stream. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. And if you watch that video, that shows what this activity looks like. Okay, so if you're interested in that, and I'm only saying this because somebody asked me, like, what do I recommend? I recommend that. You can still get hired through posted jobs, but it's damn hard. It's hard because not only... it's just so competitive. You've got something like, I don't know what it is, something like 80% of all job seekers competing for these 15% of the jobs. That's why you're going in with like 800 other applicants. It's hard to elevate yourself above the crowd when you're put on a level playing field with 800 people. That's hard for a lot of people to do. The way direct outreach works is that you don't have to do that. The reason you get hired is because you're the only one that showed up. You're the only one that took the initiative to reach out to them. It's not like 800 people decided to contact the hiring manager when there's no job posting. That's not what's going on. Maybe one other person is doing it, So it's between you and them, right? So if they have a job, which they often do, it's between you and them. A lot better odds, Kali Learning Circle says, I contact project teams. Mostly they say apply to post a job. If posted is not available on website, they say it's not available. How can I access hidden job market in this case? Well, learn how the world works. You're talking to the wrong people. Someone says, okay, here's that person again. If I am right, a professional summary is about the person. So how someone could write when person have experience in multiple fields. So if that person is applying to different job, they can they other jobs fields in their professional summary? ? Okay, maybe learn how to write properly in English, because I can understand certainly if English is your second language. I'm bilingual. I've had to learn French and all this, but when you write one sentence that's an entire paragraph long, what chance does anyone have of understanding what the hell you're talking about? You need to break up your sentences, one thought per sentence, and then maybe people can understand you. So I would do that. But it seems like you're laboring under some delusions here. The professional summary might be about a person. I suppose that has a certain logic to it, but the thing is, like I said at the beginning of this live stream, your resume is not there to get you a job, nor is it to be an accurate representation of you as a person. It's a document with a very specific goal, and that is to get you the interview. Okay? And the way you do that is you convince the reader of the resume that there's enough here that it looks like you're a fit. It looks like you're a match. Right? So it's very simple. The things they said on the job posting, they said, we're looking for someone who has this education, these skills, and this experience, right? What you want to do now, if you have that, okay, or even if you have it partially, you want to highlight that and say, okay, front row center, right up front, I got this. Bring me in for an interview. Right? If they read your resume and they spend multiple seconds on it and they're not seeing any of the things that they're looking for, right? That's a pass, right? They passed on your resume. So what you want to do is you want to take that stuff, you want to put it up front, okay? And if you have enough of the matches, they'll think, okay, maybe we'll bring this person in for an interview. Okay, they're looking for two things. They're looking for that, and they're looking for an absence of red flags, obvious red flags. So if your resume is written in crayon, then that negates the whole thing, right? If you put up front, I need $250,000 minimum, that negates everything, right? So, you know what I mean? That's what the purpose of this document is. So hopefully that's clear. Thane says, so match job description, then try to think outside the box of what's connected to the job title you're applying for. How about this? Thane, I want you to name me a job, okay? Like, what job are you going for? And what I'll do is we'll do an example, and I'll show you how to do that, okay? So do that, and then that's what we'll do. Then try to think outside the box, what's connected to the job, and try to highlight that in your resume. That's a good angle, power of networking. Yeah. It's funny. I'm going to tell a sort of personal story, but I'm not going to use real names or anything. Like, I had to hire somebody recently. And it's interesting because I've never had that type of person ever reach out to me. But yet, there's a ton of these people, these young people that are in school right now, and they're all desperate for jobs. And I can't understand for the life of me why all these people, they're They're all like really hungry for jobs. They're all wondering like, what am I going to do after school's done? And like, I get not a single person as one of them has ever contacted me ever and said like, I'm going to be graduating in a couple of months and I'm looking for this, is there any chance that you might be looking for someone who can do that? Because if someone had contacted me, guess who would be first in line for the job? Them. But not a single one of those people ever thought to go out into the real world and contact someone like me. Like, it's possible to see my contact information online. I'm not going to tell you how I do it because I don't want to be inundated with stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, it's possible to find out how to contact people, right? Without too much trouble. You know what I mean? So that's something with young people today. They're obviously not being taught any of the stuff. They're not being taught basic life skills, initiative, right? Instead, I had to resort to a job posting. I had to actually write a job posting and, and try to get it like posted in a couple of different places. And then I got inundated with like, all kinds of candidates, right? But it really reinforces like what I've been saying for years on this channel, like how this stuff works, It's like these people, like in this day and age, we've got things like Google Maps and we've got things like LinkedIn. Now, if you do check out that video I have posted below in the description called How Successful People Get Jobs, you can see how just using those two tools can open up a ton of opportunities for you. You discover all the employers around you with Google Maps, and then you use LinkedIn to see inside those employers to the individuals, like the hiring managers, all the decision makers. And it's also the tool you can use to contact them and send them a message, right? You don't need anything more than that to discover and connect to all the people that have the power to hire you. They could hire you on the spot. Here's their name. Here's their, the button you press to send them a message that they will read. They're located like 6 blocks that way. So you could easily work there if it was like a physical job you had to commute, right? What more do you need? But no, people aren't doing that. They're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then they go on job postings and stuff like this. And they go in the front door with 800 other people. And then they play this kind of game. It's not the candidate's fault. It's the fault of like education and stuff that are not like training people in how to do this. So anyway, there's my rant for today for what that's worth. Okay, so Thane says mechanical engineer. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so here I am on ChatGPT, okay? Now you can do this. The whole point of me doing this is to show you what you can do, okay? A lot of people are doing this, and that's great, but some people just still don't understand that this is available to you. So, okay, so let's pretend that I wanted to get a job as a mechanical engineer, okay? And I wanted to do design work for, I don't know, an engineering company. Now, in addition to the job posting that they've posted for a mechanical engineer, where they've stated their requirements in terms of education, skills, and experience, what other things are they looking for that are maybe not stated? I'm assuming there's soft skills in there, but what other things, maybe soft skills and beyond soft skills, are they actually looking for most likely, in all likelihood? Maybe give me a top 10. So basically, this is unstated requirements. Okay, so if a company posts a job for mechanical engineering doing design work, the posting usually lists the obvious things, okay? So this stuff. But when the hiring manager reviews resumes, they're also quietly asking, will this person actually work well in our environment and make my life easier? Okay, so beyond the requirements, here's what they're saying. So practical problem-solving ability. Can this person diagnose a problem? Blah, blah. Now, when you go to engineering school, it's kind of stupid. They like teach you a little bit of math, a little bit of physics, a little bit of like science, and then bam, there you go. You're an engineer. Congratulations. You've never actually done much work where you're actually solving real world problems and figuring out how to approach a problem from scratch, right? So if you've done that, maybe that's something you might want to put prominently on your resume, or possibly in a cover letter, or you want to put that somewhere else where they're going to see it, right? Ability to work with manufacturing. Now, maybe you've never done that, okay? But what you can do right now is you can go, okay, I'm going to do a little research project on how one works with manufacturing, okay? And I'm going to figure out from, say, ChatGPT, like I could go now and I could say, how does one work with manufacturing, and then get into it, right? And then I'm going to do one better. I'm going to go on LinkedIn. I'm going to do a search for, in my hometown, manufacturing companies, okay? I'm going to find a whole bunch of them, and I'm going to look at all the people within them. And let's pick out some managers. Let's pick out some executives in these companies, right? The ones that run it. It's no big deal. They might supervise indirectly, they might supervise 100 people. They're not like untouchable and they're not celebrities. And you reach out to them, you say, hey, would I be able to do an informational interview with you? Maybe if I could get half an hour of your time, if it's convenient, you let me know the date, time, and place. I would very much like to discuss with you your opinion, like learn what your opinion is, your expert opinion on what young engineers should do that will help them work better with manufacturing companies. Something like that, right? Now you send this out to 20, 30 people, right? One person responds and they say, sure, I got some time right here. Come on down. Next thing you know, you're talking to the head of a manufacturing company in your hometown. And you're saying, for young engineers that are just coming into this industry, if they want to work well with manufacturers, so that they understand your side of things, and so it goes very smoothly, what do you recommend they should do? And then they'll tell you, right? Now, that's not the same thing as experience, but if somebody interviews you for a job and they say, do you have any experience in manufacturing? You could say something like, well, I haven't done it per se, but I've sat down with 1, 2, or 3 people, executives that run some of the manufacturing companies around here. I've sat down with this person, and this person, and I've asked them, what makes engineers work well with manufacturing? And they told me, in a nutshell, this, and this. So I do have an appreciation for it. And that's an approach that, I'm trying to incorporate into how I do my engineering work. Something like that. And then they'll go, oh, okay, so, you don't have a lot of experience, but you seem like the person who kind of gets it. I don't anticipate any problems with you if you were working here doing work for manufacturers, something like that. I don't know, right? So these are things you can do. Now, in the process of doing informational interviews with manufacturers, maybe it turns out that one of the manufacturers is actually looking to hire an engineer. They haven't posted it, but, they've met you, and the executive is saying, hey, we actually might be looking for someone. I don't know if you'd be interested, right? That's how a lot of this stuff works. Okay, so these are all the things you can do while you're on your job search campaign. It surfaces opportunities and also builds up, how valuable you are. So when you get down to interviews, you can convince them to hire you, right? So these are examples of this. Now, you could go down this whole list, right? These are the things you want to communicate to them that you have or that you understand, right? So you could do stuff like this. You could say, what are some of the unstated stuff they never say, but they're actually looking for, things like this. McLovin says, I tried direct contact in IT sector. They really don't like it and are suspicious of any stranger contacting. Yeah, it depends who you contact. If you contact the office manager or the receptionist, that's exactly what you're going to get. If you contact any worker, that's exactly what you're going to get. If you contact middle managers, it's a mix, but usually it doesn't work. But if you contact the executives, the people in charge, and you know what to say, they're the ones that are open to this. And the reason they are, well, there's a variety of reasons, but one of them is because their job is to take unsolicited queries from the public, whereas everybody lower down, it's not part of their job, right? Let's see here. Thane says, I understand you very well and I agree with most of what you say, and that's how I got my first serious job, by reaching out. However, years passed now that I feel like companies are not that interested. They rather look for high skill, low salary than a specialist they'd have to pay solid salary. No problem. Well, hey, each to their own. But yeah, I suppose you could proceed by just assuming things work a certain way and then not bothering to test it. Sure, America says, fake it till you make it. Through the front door. I hate that part of having... No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in fake it till you make it, and that's not what I'm saying if that came over that way. I'm absolutely not endorsing somebody falsify anything or make it look like they're something they're not. That's absolutely not what this is about. Now, the problem is that when I deal with a lot of people from IT, the engineering world, IT world, any other technical world, right? The problem that these people have, and that's, something I've bumped into again and again, and I can say this because I am a technical person, is that they just don't understand sales at all to a ridiculous and crippling degree. And they also... The reason why they don't understand it, ironically, even though they're very bright, is because they don't respect it, because they think it's all bullshit, which of course it isn't. This is why these people have so much problems finding jobs, is because they don't understand how to sell themselves and they don't understand how anything works. So, they've spent too much time in schools. That's the problem. Now, I'm not trying to beat up on anyone, but what I am trying to do is I'm trying to say, look, if you open your eyes and you look around at how the world operates, you can see that a lot of the stuff that they fed you in school is clearly BS. For example, one of the things that they tell you in school is to stay in your lane, stay inside the lines, don't get above yourself, don't take any initiative whatsoever, because everything is governed by a rule of some kind that they've just made up. And everything has to be approved for you to be allowed to do it. That's the school experience, Now, there are good reasons why they do this. It helps you manage large quantities of people, and it helps you get some kind of consistency together and uniformity, and that's important. But the side effect is that people come out of school thinking, this is how the world operates. I just sit here until someone tells me what to do, and then I just follow the procedure they give me, and that's how things happen. And it doesn't work that way. It only works that way in isolated bubbles, artificial little bubbles, like school, like government. But the wider world doesn't work that way. Usually the way things happen is you are given an opportunity because you showed up for it, whereas all the people that didn't show up for it don't get the opportunity. It has nothing to do with what's fair or who deserves it or who should get it. Those are artificial concepts. What we see is the people who do get it are the ones that show up for it. They go and they talk to the person that has that to provide. If you never ever contact a person that has a job to give, you can expect that you probably won't get a job. It works that way with contract work. It works that way with sales. It works that way with everything. What do you spend your money on? You spend your money on the stuff that, was kind of in your face. So if you see an ad on the internet, like, Amazon or, whatever, you tend to go to Amazon and buy that thing. If you're never ever told about something, usually you don't end up buying it. You know what I mean? So this is the thing. Now, introverts can kick ass at this process. A lot of introverts have the brains and they have the discipline to be able to do really well at this kind of thing. The problem is that a lot of those people, they don't tune into this or they don't respect it. They think it's all, they throw these derogatory terms around that people are using in the chat, right? Like the word actor, faking it. Though that's not an accurate description of what sales is. Sales is saying, look, I have this to offer. Here's what it is. Here's how it works. If you're interested, let me know. That's all it is. And when you show up for a job, you're saying, listen, I understand you're looking for a person. I'm a person. I believe I have what you're looking for. Here's the details. Here's what I have to offer. If you're interested, let me know. You know? And if the two work out, you know, they just happen to be looking for what you happen to have, right? You're just facilitating that process. There's no smoke and mirrors. There's nothing like, you know, that involves faking, lying, acting, you know, bullshit. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. Oh, sure, you get like idiots on both sides everywhere in the world screwing it up, making it look like this is how it is, what it is, but it isn't. You know? It's just that this stuff has never been taught to people, ever, you know? So they get a very distorted view of how stuff works, you know? And it's this kind of thinking is the reason why you know, young people sitting in schools that like have what I need, they didn't ever contact me to say, hey, I got this, are you looking? Because if they had, I would have said, absolutely, yeah, send me your stuff and let's see if we can make this work. They would have been first in line for it, you know? Okay, let's see here. Google Recruiter is okay to lie on the resume. Oh, if a Google Recruiter said it, then it must be true, right? Because Google search is so effing good, right? Those people are on their A game, I can tell you. They're the company that OpenAI is kicking their ass, right? That's the one you're referring to? So they can't have ever been wrong about anything. They want experience for doing entry-level jobs. Yeah, I know. It's a consequence of having 800 people apply for every job you put. So if it's an entry-level job, wouldn't you implement that condition to try and pare it down? Now only 100 of the 800 people qualify. You know? It's a direct result of the situation they're in, right? Sheen and Grief says, this is an interesting live stream. I tend to be I find myself going off on stuff today. Maybe it's a Monday thing. I'm not sure. It also might be some of the messages I'm getting, but no. I mean, like, listen. I'm trying to help people. Like, honestly, I'm not saying what I'm saying to piss anyone off or to make anyone feel bad. I'm saying, like, this is the reality. Now, don't take my word for any of this. If you take exception to what I'm saying, you think I'm wrong, go and like look at the world. You know, like, don't just, you know, have an assumption that I'm going to assume everything works this way and I'm not going to bother to find out. You know what I mean? I like the phrase you used in one of your videos, massaging the truth when having interviews. Yeah, exactly. You see, what do they do in the sales process? What they do, generally speaking, is you tend to emphasize all the good points and you tend to de-emphasize all the bad points, right? So anyone who goes to a job interview and says, like, first off, I just want you to understand that, like, you know, I've got terrible social skills. Terrible. Like, I can't work with anyone. And I have horrible breath. This has been a real problem for me, you know, just in the interests of honesty, I just want you to know this, right? And then they go on and on about how, like, they failed at various things. You know, like, yeah, it's honest, it's great, but, you know, what kind of a first impression are you making, right? There's nothing wrong with saying any of that. You're being honest, but when you consider the situation that the other person is on the other side of the table, they need to hire someone. They've called 10 people down to do 10 interviews with them. Based on their first impressions, they're going to go deeper with maybe 3 of them. And then based on what they find for those 3 and how they feel about them, they're going to pick one of them, right? Now, if you go down there as one of the 10 candidates that are doing an interview and you lead with all your bad points in the interests of honesty, right? Are they going to pick you? No. They're not going to look at you long enough to then be open-minded about hearing all the good stuff. Because they've decided after the 3rd thing you've said, sorry, no dice. You're out of the running. Right? So sales is like, I mean, I'm not defending everything that everyone does, because there's a lot of jackasses out there, but sales generally is like, here's the advantages of this. Here's, I'm trying to make a very good impression by leading with all its advantages. Right? I'm going to purposefully not tell you anything bad if I only have a little bit of time and I want to try and make a good impression. I want to convince you to take a deeper look at it and consider it. And that's exactly what you're doing in a job interview, by the way. So yeah, Thane says, don't get me wrong, I appreciate your input a lot. However, I see those things that were listed in ChatGPT in my experience and reflected in my resume, yet I don't get a lot of matches. Well, maybe a resume isn't the right medium to communicate that, right? For example, you want to, you want to go see a movie or something, if anyone watches movies anymore, and, you're reading a review and it says, this movie looks spectacular, the special effects are amazing, and, all the characters are really beautiful, and it's just eye candy as far as the eye can see. You should check it out. Does that really convey like how staggeringly, earth-shattering, bowel-shatteringly amazing this movie is? No, it isn't. Maybe the written word is not the right medium, right? Maybe they need to see you in person to get that, right? I'm just saying, like, if you're writing it down. The other thing is that some of the soft skills, the reason why they don't write that stuff is because what good does it do to write on a resume and say, I have really good communication skills? The whole point of talking to you is that they're going to get a sample of your communication skills and see for themselves. That's the whole point, right? So, you know what I mean? Like that's the real test of that. Maybe if you're trying to make a case for yourself on your resume and you have to do it with communication skills for some reason, you could say, well, these are the types of communication I've had to handle. I've worked in the PR department. I've done 5 years in sales. I've done, warranty and customer service. So I have the chops with different types of communication, right? So maybe they see that and they go, okay, well, that has potential. And then they bring you in. You know what I mean? I see those things that were listed by ChatGPT in my experience reflected in my resume, yet I don't get a lot of matches. Yeah, well, are you going on the idea that if you match their qualifications, you will get an interview? See, that also is false. That's what happens when you get 800 people applying for something. There's going to be a lot of people that make matches. The problem is they might just take the first 10 or the first 5. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that if you didn't get an interview, it doesn't mean that you didn't match. They usually have an overabundance of people. That's the problem with posted jobs. That's why the competition's so high. Thane says, I just lack serious networking, and so I so far relied on common ways to apply for a job. I agree, maybe I should be more active in my search. Listen, watch that video that I have linked, okay? And then I would encourage you to learn more about that stuff. Learn all you can. Try some stuff. It really doesn't cost you anything to do in terms of money, or like you can do all this stuff from your computer, you know what I mean? Or presumably your phone, your smartphone, if that's what you're doing. You don't have to go and do all your networking in person. Some extroverts like to do that. I'm not an extrovert. I've always done my networking like where everything is online up to the point where someone books a meeting, then I go and see them. If that's what I'm asking for. And I don't often ask for that. William says, does anyone know that daylight savings already happened? Yeah. Yeah, that did happen. Daylight savings sets the hour back an hour. Yeah. I think most people in the world know that, or at least the people that are in the time zones that are affected by daylight savings time are affected. So yes, that happened with me. I've heard that they're getting rid of it. I don't have a problem with them getting rid of it. I think it makes a lot of sense to farmers, but like to nobody else. I'm not sure. And as we go further into the future, the percentage of people that work as farmers gets smaller and smaller, right? Because we're getting more efficient at like producing food. So something like 200 years ago, like 80% of people worked in some way in like food production or something. And then like you fast forward and it's like 1% of people. 1% of people provide the food supply for everybody, you know? So anyway, I think that's how it works. Somebody says, you got me an internship at Samsung starting this summer. Love you. Well, that's great. Congratulations, DW. That's great to hear. And thank you for telling me. America First says, you're pretty feisty today. Well, I'm taking you to task. That's for sure. America First. No, listen, hey, it's all good. It's all good. And I appreciate you being here, and you're not saying stupid things. You know, if you do have any questions, just let me know and we'll get down to it. It's all good. William says, could you go off on daylight savings? Go off? You mean like, could I get triggered about daylight savings? I suppose I could, but I don't feel like it. I'm not that hostile to it. No, I'm just, it's frustrating because for years I've tried to turn people on to like networking. I say things like 85% of jobs are not posted, they're available in networking. And I get like the resounding answer I always get back to that is bullshit, you know? And it's like, okay, whatever, you know? I mean, I've done things like this, you know, where we've asked ChatGPT. So of all the jobs that are out there that you know one could get, what percentage of them are actually posted? No one knows. Okay, you see, it keeps changing its percentage every time I ask, but today it says only about 20 to 40% of jobs are posted. 60 to 80 of jobs are filled without ever being publicly advertised. This is what people call the hidden job market. Now that number varies, blah, 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 right? Okay. You know, and it goes into all this random BS about it, but you know, it's like, it's an open secret. People can easily find this stuff out, but whenever I try and tell people about it, I get like instant pushback. I get people not watching my videos, but then it's the same people that come and complain like, oh, I can't find a job. It's like, yeah, because you're not open to learning about where they are, how to get them, you know? You're clinging to this thing that people did like 50 years ago, just assuming it still applies. I suspect it's not really your fault. It's just that nobody's ever told you, you know, that this is not how things work. So it's just a little frustrating because I get people pushing back on everything I say. And it's like, well, I've done all these things myself. I mean, I'm not making it up. You can easily see, like with what I did here, you can easily see evidence of this. Not to mention the fact that people have written articles all over the internet for like 30 years about this, you know? So it's not exactly hard to uncover. It's just that they don't want to believe it. That's the thing. Or they have certain preconceived ideas. Like another thing that I hear on a daily basis is that networking is the same thing as nepotism. That's something I constantly get in the comments on my videos. You know, when they say, oh, I'm advocating nepotism. Like, no, I'm not, you know? So anyway. So yeah, that's why I might have been a bit triggered earlier, but it's fine. Call Me Glitter is here, and Call Me Glitter is a member of my channel. So thank you for the support, Call Me Glitter. It's great to see people so enthusiastic about this. And you're using my little icon. That should be like that little icon. That should be like an Andy Warhol thing, like the can of soup. You know, it's like a picture of me, right? You know, if you're going to do something, you have to assume a pleasing shape. So, hence that picture. Thane says, I will certainly watch the video you mentioned after the stream. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I hope it works for you, Thane. Just learn all you can. I'm not asking anyone to buy into anything I'm trying to do. Just just do two things. First of all, open your eyes, open your ears, observe what happens. Now, one way to see this stuff, maybe an obvious way, is look at in your organization. If you have a job right now, or if you don't, look in the place you're currently working or the last place you worked and think, like the boss, when they hired the boss, how did they hire the boss? Did they hire them with a job posting? Usually that's not what we see. Usually they might, if they do a job posting, it's kind of like after the fact, just to kind of make it look like that's how they hired someone when really it wasn't. The illusion that things are on a level playing field and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Now look at like members of your own family. Ask them how they got their most recent job. Did they apply to a job posting to a company that they had no connection to and get it that way? Or did they use some form of networking? Maybe they reached out to a company, they showed up one day and asked, or maybe they had a contact at that company, maybe someone they'd worked with at a previous job. That person ended up at that company, and say this person said, "Are you hiring?" or anything like that, and they said, "Yeah, I could put your name in, and they'll give you a chance based on me making a recommendation." Right? It's not the same thing as nepotism. Nepotism was when they hire someone because they know them. This is not that. This is, if you make a recommendation, they'll give you a chance. They'll look at you. But you're hired based on your own merits. You're not hired because somebody recommended you. You're hired because they, brought you in for an interview and you checked out, right? So you could ask your family members about this and see, okay, how many people got hired through a posted job and how many people got hired through some other form of networking? You're going to see most people get hired through some other form of networking, right? So maybe that's something worth pursuing. And the great thing is that there's many different things you can do under this umbrella of networking. Some people are extrovert, and they do everything in person and, they're that type of person. Great. Some people are introverts and they don't do it that way. They have a small number of friends, but they tend to have a deeper friendship with them. McLovin says, "I'm strongly opposed to daylight savings. Ended immediately. They can't just choose what time it is." Well, hey, everybody's got to have a cause, right? Are you the type of person that would picket? You carry a sign and do a chant and, all that kind of stuff. If you're going to pick a cause, the daylight savings thing is right at the forefront of everyone's mind. I remember years ago, when Canada came out with the dollar coin, right? I don't think Americans are quite there yet, but the Canadians came out with the dollar coin. It had a picture of a loon on it, like a bird, right? So they call it the loonie. And I remember it was controversial when it came out, and there was some guy in the newspaper, he hated the loonie. He hated it. He hated the sight of it. He never wanted to see another loonie as long as he lived. So he decided to pay his taxes in loonies. So he showed up with this treasure chest type thing with filled with loonies, and he delivered it to City Hall or something. I can't remember. They did a story on it. So hey, if you're gonna make a statement, make it a good one. America First says, "No problem at all. You are very ethical. I sometimes listen to advice from not so ethical people, Google recruiters." Yes. Worthless bastards to a man, unfortunately. Or to, well, I guess it wouldn't be a man if they're a recruiter. Isn't 95% of recruiters are female or something? I think it's chefs. Chefs, right? 95% of people that deal with food are female, but then the top chefs in the world are all male. So go figure that one out. I don't know if you need to have extremely competitive people at the top. You need to be like Gordon Ramsay. You're going to just yell expletives into somebody's face as part of your 9 to 5 and being a chef. Maybe that's why all the top chefs are guys. I'm not sure. Something we need to get to the bottom of, I'm afraid. Sheen and Grief says, any more recommendations to answer the salary expectation question when applying? I asked ChatGPT for a good number, but still feel uncertain. Yeah, well, I did a pretty popular video that talks about that. First, I will answer that, but first I just want to, I haven't done this yet. I have to do this every once in a while. So just as a reminder to everyone, check out this course. Okay, it's linked in the description box below. It's all my advice in one place. If you are wondering about the networking stuff that I've talked about today, because I sense several people have been wondering, like, what exactly do you have to do and what are you recommending? Check out this course. It's all in there, step by step, a couple of different methods. It teaches you how to get hired in the posted job market, how to get hired in the hidden job market. So check that out. And I also have this course if you want to learn business, the $100 MBA, best bang for the buck around. So check that out. And this is the other one that I think people here might actually care about. If you're wanting to tack on high-level communication skills, check out this course. Everything I learned about communication skills, going from a supervisor when I started to a CEO when I ended my corporate career, I put into this course. So check it out. It's called Write Like a Professional. It teaches you how to write, but more than that, it teaches you how to respond to different things. So it's also the most self-contained of the 3 courses that I have, the most compact. I've made videos dedicated to each of these courses, explaining how they work, what you get, answering frequently asked questions. And all of this stuff is all linked in the description box below this live stream. So check it out. Okay, so salary expectations. It's a standard interview question, but more than that, it's a standard elimination question in the job application phase. So if they ask you this before you even get to an interview, they ask you this on a web form or something like that. The bottom line is usually they haven't informed you about critical things that you would need to make an accurate determination of how much money you need. For example, they haven't even told you what the benefits are. Are there any benefits? Do they give you a company car? Do they give you vacation? Do they give you sick days? Do they give you personal days? Do they give you, I don't know, a dental plan or, eye care, like whatever? Do they give you the corner office? They haven't told you any of this yet, right? Are you required to work holidays? Is it shift work? Do they require you to travel? Blah, 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 blah. It's kind of hard to tell them like a number when you don't even know any of that stuff, right? So here's what you do. Just assume that all those unknowns are all best case scenario. Okay? So lots of vacation, lots of personal days, no travel. You don't have to work holidays. Lots of opportunities for advancement. Your boss is a pleasure. Your workers become your best. Coworkers become your best friends. Blah, 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 blah. Now, fill in a number. It'll probably be pretty low, right? That's what you say. Now, if at a later time they start filling in some of those blanks and they inform you, okay, here's how much vacation you get. Here's the benefits you get. Here's our policy with travel and with shift work and with remote work and, et cetera, et cetera. And it starts to not be so rosy, then you can always revise your number upwards, right? There's nothing dishonest about it. You're giving the best number, the most honest number based on the information that they've made available, right? As they make available more information, your number naturally changes, right? Now, if you get to a job interview, you're being interviewed, you're in person. They say, what are your salary expectations, right? They do this, right? That's my index finger, by the way. That looked like something else, but anyway. So you go to an interview and they ask the same question. Now you can give more than a number. Usually on a web form, they make it so that you have to give a number, a single number, and you can't skip the question. In an interview, you have more options available. So I recommend a 3-step way to handle it. The first thing you say is, well, they say, what are your salary expectations? You say, well, it's too soon to say. I would need to know more about this position before I could tell you. Right? Now, sometimes that works. They go, okay, and then they just move on, right? A lot of times it doesn't work. They say, well, I understand, but we still need to know what your expectations are. At that point, you move on to step 2. You say, okay, you throw the question back at them. You say, well, listen, this position was posted publicly, right? Assuming it was. That means it's an official position. It must have been discussed and approved. And therefore, the salary range must have been discussed and approved. So, can I ask what it is? And sometimes they'll tell you. They'll say, oh, it's between this and this. Right? In which case you say, works fine for me. Sounds good to me. I got no problem with that. Right? So you pass the question. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Right? They say, well, we don't know what this, this position that we're interviewing you for, right? Yeah, we have no idea what it pays, right? So you have to tell us your expectations, but we're not going to tell you what the range is. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In which case you move on to the third and final phase of this. You give them a wide range. You say, well, look, okay, listen, at this point, the only thing I can say for sure is I smack my microphone around in a haphazard and domineering kind of way. The only thing I can say at this point is, somewhere between here and here, somewhere in there, that would probably be good. Now, those two numbers that you give, they're not ridiculous. Okay, they're not like totally out to lunch. They're within reason, but they're a stretch. Okay, so like really low to really high, where it's within reason. You say, look, somewhere in this range here, I'm sure that will be fine. That's all I can tell you at this juncture. And if they push you any further, it's starting to get weird at that point. Like they keep hammering on this one thing. Usually most people don't push that hard. And if they do, it's kind of a red flag. It's starting to feel very awkward. But if they do, you repeat your answer. You say, well, like I just kind of said, I can't refine it any further than this. Somewhere between here and here, somewhere in that range would be fine for me. That's all I can tell you at this point. Right? And that's how you handle that question. Now, why do you do this? You do it because if you give a range, they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much money. Because you never committed to like a high amount. You said like somewhere in this range, and the range starts pretty low. So they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much. The other reason why you do it is because if you decide to ask for more money later, let's say you get to the offer stage and they make you an offer. Now you can ask for more money. You never committed to a low number. You said somewhere in this range, and this range goes pretty high. So that allows you to ask for something more, and you're not going back on anything, So that's the reason why you would do this, okay? So that's how I'd recommend you handle that. Sheen Grief says, I will join you, McLovin. I have no strong opinion which time, just pick one and leave it. Yeah, I kind of agree on the daylight savings. What I don't like is that, you go through the year, you go through the winter, and where I am, like the winter looks like the Arctic, right? And you get to the point where when you get up in the morning, the sun's actually up. It's not pitch black. It's like dawn, right? Or it's daylight. And then they do daylight savings and you lose that. So the next day you get up and it's black. It's dark, like the middle of the night. I hate that. I wish they would just leave it so that, you have a sense of accomplishment. The days are getting longer and it feels that way. McLovin says, should I try a unique approach to applications and fill it with swears and threats? Would that help me stand out? Make it all about their mother. That's right. That's right. Just don't talk about yourself. Just talk about what you're going to do to their mother, and just see what happens, or give them a call. Ask them if they got your application, if they wanted to talk about it. You never know, right? Hey, if you want to be memorable, I get that question a lot too. How do I stand out, right? How do I make an impression? Well, that'll make an impression, right? The reality is boring. You need to make an impression, but only in a specific way. You need to be someone who fits the requirements better than anyone else. That's, if you're applying for a posted job, that's unfortunately what passes, going in there and, doing an interview and like being super memorable because it's just weird is not necessarily going to get you the job. It's not about that. It's not like we're in drama school, Okay, we've reached the end of the chat. We got a nice round 37 people here. I'm going to be back in about half an hour. I got another live stream scheduled. That's where we talk about entrepreneurship and business. So it's a little bit of a different thing. We're not talking about job search and stuff like that. But I mean, entrepreneurship is another thing like that people do, right? You don't have to work as an employee your entire life to make money. There are other things out there. Entrepreneurship is one, right? So I talk about that. I try to encourage people to do that. It's never been easier than it is right now to do that kind of stuff. But the catch is that, you can't learn it overnight. It takes a little bit to learn it, for most people. So that's kind of the deal. Call Me Glitter says something really complimentary. Thank you, Call Me Glitter. And thank you to Call Me Glitter for being a member of my channel. That's really awesome. I do live Q&As like this all week. I'm here Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this week I'm doing this. On Wednesday, I have a joint live stream again with another YouTuber, Abby from the channel Life Work Balance. She is a recruiter, so we answer questions together. She has a little bit of a different perspective than me on a lot of things because of her background. So you can get her perspective and my perspective both together on Wednesdays on that joint live stream. So that's happening this week. And yeah, I have a couple of things scheduled. Something I'm looking forward to actually in, I think it's a couple of weeks, is I'm doing a live stream with someone that I don't normally, I don't normally go on live streams with people that don't talk about job search. And I'm doing a live stream with somebody called Chato from the channel Call Me Chato, who is a Canadian ex-TV executive. And we're going to be talking about TV and entertainment and Hollywood and movies and all that kind of stuff, just where that industry is coming from. And I thought it was an interesting topic because some of the weird stuff that Hollywood is doing right now, a lot of people are wondering, like, why are they doing what they're doing? Because they've been losing money for many years, and it just seems like a paradox. Like, why are you doing something that loses money year over year, and you do that for 10 years in a row almost? So I think what's going on behind the scenes with these companies is what's interesting, what their corporate strategy is, dictated by their financial statements, what the financial position of the company is, because it's directly leading to certain behaviors. So I find that stuff really interesting. We're going to talk about some of that stuff. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. I've never done a live stream like it, so hopefully it'll be fun. But take care, everybody. I'll be back in half an hour talking about entrepreneurship. Check out my courses, especially that one for most people, if you want to go deeper with me into job search. And yeah, wish you best of luck, and I will see you soon. Take care.